Good evening, Dolphins fans. Welcome to another episode here of On the FinSide with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, all of our social media outlets, as well as the FanSided Network and FinFanatic.com. The 2022 NFL Draft has concluded. By far, the Dolphins' shortest one in my lifetime, at least. I mean, just 4 picks: a third-round pick, a fourth-round pick, 2 sevenths, and some undrafted free agents. And the reason for that, and we've got to start here, Paul, is Tyreek Hill. And still at the end of the day, even though it was a pretty uneventful couple of days for the Dolphins, as far as, compared to other teams, well worth that trade.
Oh, 100%. You have to factor that into any draft grade you put out there. Tyreek Hill is one of the best, if not the best receivers in the NFL right now. Miami has gotten so much faster everywhere around the field, even with only having 4 draft picks. I know they've got a handful of undrafted free agents we're going to talk mostly about later. But at wide receiver, at running back, at linebacker, Miami is built for speed right now, and that's going to be fun to watch.
Absolutely. I mean, and with that speed, their first pick at pick 102, it took, 9 hours of watching the draft, which I enjoyed every minute of, but to get to pick 102, and it was Channing Tindall. And this is somebody that, I always say we're not hard to find. We have receipts. You can go and see our shows. We had an off-ball linebacker segment, and we talked about Channing Tindall. And Channing Tindall, heading into day 2, was my 9th ranked player, after the obvious guys that were going to be off the board. So, I mean, somebody who is a heat-seeking missile. I mean, 6'2", 228, 4.47, 42-inch vertical leap, mean, angry player who Georgia blitzed 1 out of every 3 snaps. So I think he's going to fit in pretty well here in this defense that blitzes more than anybody else in the NFL with Josh Bohr's defense.
Well, and I think the other factor here is Georgia had kind of a training wheels for a defense that moves their players around before the snap a little bit. So he's got some mild exposure to that aspect. Everything with him is just seek and destroy. But a Landon Roberts right now is penciled in as the starter next to Jerome Baker. And my problem with Landon Roberts isn't the fact that Landon Roberts makes big plays. Landon Roberts is inconsistent because he guesses. Channing Tindall reads, responds, processes quickly, and attacks, and has speed for days, and he gets to that top gear very quickly. I mean, I know I talked about this when we drafted him, but there was one play where he actually missed the tackle, which was rare. He slid off a quarterback's leg. I can't remember for the life of me who it was against. Hit the ground literally flat and was already on his feet up to top speed and caught the quarterback 3 or 4 yards away while he was running upfield, which was a huge play. There's no quit. One of the things I hate with guys is when they miss a tackle like that, you'll see them stop, pound the ground for a second, and then go. Not him. He was already, doing up downs and flying towards the ball with reckless abandon, but under control at the same time. And that's something I really like, because that can be the difference between somebody getting away from you for a 40-yard gain and what ended up being a 4-yard loss.
And typically, when you look at a program like Georgia or Alabama, a big question I always ask is, if they went to this college, if they didn't go to this college, if they went to, I don't know, Lafayette State or Fayetteville, or, I mean, even a bigger school like, Houston or something like that, would they still be regarded as the same prospect? And for me, the answer with Channing Tindall is no. I think he would be actually projected higher because he would have played more snaps and he would have tested out still at that level athletically when he got to the combine, and it would have raised those same eyebrows.
Yeah, he absolutely would have. And the more you play, the more exposure you get. And with a player like Tindall, that would have been bad for us because he wouldn't have been there at 102.
Certainly. And in the fourth round, there was a lot of value left on the board. We were talking about that at the beginning of day 3 here. And the Dolphins pick was Eric Ezukanma. And I think any Dolphins fan, quite honestly, would be lying if they said that they thought that was going to be the pick. Look, and
I
but
I'm
the
gonna
other
disagree with you based on our listeners here, Kat, because there were a lot of folks in our chat leading up to it. I know we talked about him briefly on our wide receiver show and a couple other shows leading up. Maybe not the fourth round. I think before we drafted Tyreek Hill, I think I actually took him in like the 5th round of one of my mocks. But he was a name that was bouncing around. There were people high on him, including in our chat.
The way I categorize the receiver class here is there were about 20 to 25 receivers projected to go in the first 3 rounds of the draft. And then after that, there was 10 or 15 guys, with him being one of them, that were expected to at least get drafted. When I watch him, though, I mean, regardless of where he's taken, a lot of interesting things with him. He's 6'2", 209 pounds, one of the biggest wingspans and arm lengths in the entire nation. The only, and how much I emphasize arm length in today's NFL. He has 33.5-inch arms, which is passable for an offensive tackle. That is the second best among the top receivers that were drafted in the first 4 rounds, other than Drake London. So he's somebody that has a big catch radius. That's a good thing for him. And when you watch him, considering that over the last 3 years, he led Texas Tech in receiving yards each of the last 3 years. He had 5 different quarterbacks that played for him. And it seemed like because of Texas Tech's quarterbacks not being very good, he was catching a lot of short passes and breaking a lot of tackles. That's what I saw on tape with him. A lot of broken tackles. I made notes of him being a very poor man's Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'd say very poor man's, but at the same time, he's a very physical receiver. Not only does he have a good wingspan, high point the ball, he shields well for contested catches, and he'll fight for yardage after the catch. He'll break away from people and get that extra yards after catch. He's a different style of receiver than anything else we have on the roster right now. And I think he's going to be a real good fit for that and kind of serve as a blankie for Tua when needed.
You're right. And as far as his spot on the roster, and Nick Tater 13 on Twitter pointed this out to me too, and I think it's well said that he's kind of taken that spot of Mac Hollins on the roster, where he's that 3rd, 4th receiver, that physical type guy, and is going to get 20, 30 snaps a game and also play special teams too.
But he's also 50 times the wide receiver that Mac Hollins is. And I like Mac Hollins a lot, but Mac Hollins made his bones in his roster spot based on his special teams prowess that happened to translate to occasionally making a big play in the receiving game.
Yeah, and Mac Hollins came out of college as a rare special teams player. I remember Todd McShay talking about Mac Hollins as a rare special teams player. He never developed with the Eagles. That's why he was cut, but they can't develop any receivers. But yeah, I mean, as far as pure receiving wide receiver ability, yes. And I don't know if there's a connection at all with this, but former Texas Tech wide receiver Wes Welker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got to think he might have connections back there. Maybe he knows a little bit of something that other teams don't know. That's why the pick is a little bit intriguing because look, it's not that this was a crazy pick. He was always a day 3 pick, but more mid to late day 3 as opposed to early day 3 or, day 2. So I think the Dolphins may have and that's not a knock on the guy. The Dolphins may know something about him that other teams didn't know, because if the Dolphins had passed on him at that spot, he's probably not going in the next 3 or 4 picks. That's just my opinion on that.
Yeah, and I mean, he had one catch, and again, I forget the opponent, in the back corner of the end zone, from probably about 30 yards out, where he had, I think both players were committing pass interference on him. One of them literally had their body and their arm between him and the ball, trying to push the ball out of his hands. And he was so strong-handed with that ball that he's holding the ball out like this while they're trying to push it out of his hands from in between him. So they've got all the leverage in the world. And he manages to secure the catch and finish the footwork. He could be one of those guys that ends up on this roster and with the makeup of this team, that in his limited opportunities that he's going to get on the field right now, could end up being one of those guys that has 300 yards receiving, but 6 to 8 touchdowns on the season with red zone work at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's got potential. There's no doubt about that. I also think a lot of people in our chat were frustrated that the Dolphins didn't go running back, and I shared those frustrations too, because I mean, you look at 3 or 4 picks before, Zamir White, Isaiah Spiller go, and you're starting to see all these trade downs in the 4th round as well. It's hard for me to believe that the Dolphins could not have, fallen back a couple of spots and still gotten the same player. But it's nothing egregious. So, and after today, I'm going to drop it with this guy.
Well, and what I'll say too is a lot of people wanted running back, but and I know we're gonna dive much deeper on the UDFAs later this week, but I think Miami actually got their starting running back of the future, possibly by the end of this season or the beginning of the 2023 season, as a UDFA in this class. Somebody I talked about with those 7th round picks we're about to dive into as a target that I thought could do a very good job for the Dolphins.
Zaquandre White from South Carolina. His teammate Kevin Harris was drafted by the Patriots in the 6th round here today. Yeah, we'll see on that. And the Dolphins have had undrafted free agents make an impact, like Nick Needham, like Preston Williams. So we'll see if that's the same case with some of the guys the Dolphins picked up after the draft. 7th round, Paul, Cameron Goode, the linebacker from California, and Skyler Thompson, the quarterback from Kansas State. Yeah, I mean, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask, because if I were a general manager, I would never own a 7th round pick. I would trade them away for anything that mattered. I like that Greer tries to package them with something else to, move up, a round or two. But I actually like the Cameron Goode selection. Now that I've watched a little bit more of him, he was somebody that had a lot of pre-draft visits after a great pro day at California, and that's something that's telling a lot too, because if you're talking about somebody who's this defensive end / outside linebacker who fits that Andrew Van Ginkel mold, I could see him being potentially a succession plan for Van Ginkel if he leaves as a free agent after the 2022 season.
Sorry, can you repeat the last part? I was reading something in the chat.
Yeah, so I could see him maybe being a succession plan for Andrew Van Ginkel, because he plays that same role as the kind of that offhang linebacker, rushes the passer a lot, and he got a lot of interest toward the end of the draft process.
So Cameron Goode is probably my least favorite of the 4 selections. I like the intent. I think he's going to be an okay player. Uh, I don't know if he's ever going to reach Andrew Van Ginkel level of ability. And that's not saying Van Ginkel's a pro bowler, but Van Ginkel has a knack for special plays. Especially when Miami's in that cover zero defense. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but I just watching him play, I don't think he's going to be quite to the Andrew Van Ginkel level, even when he hits his full ceiling.
Oh, I agree with you on that. And I mean, Van Ginkel was a 5th-round pick and has clearly outperformed that. And I hope the Dolphins do end up re-signing him. And if Van Ginkel is smart, he would probably take that offer, because if you look at what happened with Vince Beagle, I mean, he's one injury away from making minimum salary, you know. So I mean, he's a good player, but he doesn't have the numbers to put on paper now to justify getting, you know, 8, 9, 10 million a year after the season. He just doesn't right now. So I think that if the Dolphins are talking with him about an extension, he should take it. I think Cameron Goode fits that same style of
Yeah.
player compared to Van Ginkel. So he's
I'm concerned with him making the final roster.
yeah, he may not, especially if they're looking at Melvin Ingram too. I mean, and yeah, I mean it's going to be a challenge for him. It's going to be a challenge for any 7th-round pick. If you're talking about just from a value standpoint of all the 4 picks, Cameron Goode would be my second out of the 4. And the last one would be Skyler Thompson from Kansas State.
Yeah. He is a very, very efficient passer that plays with heart, plays with energy. I went back and I watched some more of his deep throws after my comments earlier, and I didn't feel like he lost as much accuracy as I initially thought on those deep balls that he threw. He didn't turn the ball over a tremendous amount in college. He made a lot of plays with his legs, even though he's not the fastest player on the field. He had one play where he actually ran over a quarterback shoulder first that was reminiscent of Tua's play against the Jets last year. And in reality, like, there's a lot of upside with this kid. And I actually like this pick as a developmental guy. I don't think anybody's going to try to steal him from the Dolphins if he ends up on the practice squad. I think he fits that Tua Teddy mold as far as what the Dolphins are looking for in a quarterback. And again, 42 touchdowns to 16 interceptions in college. He had a 142 total passer efficiency rating, which is pretty significant. And that's really, if you look at his last 2 years, it was 158 in his final season as a senior. And in his shortened COVID season, he had 165.3. I mean, he puts on a clinic. And I think he had 26 rushing touchdowns in college as well. Yeah, 26 rushing touchdowns. He's a very, very, very tough player, and he's a competitor who still manages to stay efficient. There's a lot to like with him, even though he may never sniff the field in a regular season game.
I was at work about 2 weeks ago, and Skyler Thompson was on doing an interview on Good Morning Football, and my coworker said, "Hey, who's that guy? Where's he going to get drafted?" And I said, "Oh, that's Skyler Thompson from Kansas State. He's not going to get drafted." He ends up being one of the Dolphins' 4 picks. But you had a really good breakdown of that, though, too. And the word you said is efficient, and he is absolutely efficient. And he doesn't make a lot of mistakes on the football field. So that puts him really in that, backup territory. Smart quarterback, good backup. And the question I ask myself is, late in the 7th round, would you take Damon Heward with a little bit more arm talent? Probably. I mean,
Mhm.
with the late seventh round pick, and that's kind of what I compare this situation to.
Yeah, and I mean, in reality, with either of those picks, and I know I said this during our live coverage, I would have taken Zaquandre White, and Miami got him as a undrafted free agent. Um, Kat, I want you to go back and look at Zaquandre White. He is like even more than we already have. He is a fun watch, and you really, even watching a highlight package, you get a good sense of who he is as a running back because he only had, believe it or not, I want to say 125 total touches rushing and receiving in college. That's not counting a couple of kick returns. He was
Right.
a
And so he never had over 600 yards rushing, which on one hand brings up the question of why not?
he was only
But
a
on
running back for, and that's where I'm getting to. He was only a running back
the
for 2 seasons. He came into college as a linebacker at Florida State, transferred to South Carolina, sat out a year, and then had 16 carries as a junior after converting the running back, and then his final year he had 88 carries for 583 yards, 6.6 yards per rush, 19 receptions for 202 yards, and you can see a lot of the rawness there, but he has video game moves, and it's funny because when I watched him run with the ball, the wording that popped into my head was urgent patience.
Okay.
He
Okay.
lets the holes develop, but hits them hard at the same time. And if they're not there, he takes the yards that are there. He runs with the toughness of a former linebacker, um, but that's not his only or not the only move set in his repertoire. He keeps his legs moving, breaks a lot of tackles, but he can find a lane and hit it quick. And he seems to tick all those boxes of if Mike McDaniel was playing Madden and building a running back, this
Yes.
feels like who he would build.
Right. So yeah, he was a transfer from Florida State, like you said, and for South Carolina before this year only had 16 rushes, and this year 88 rushes, 583 yards, 6.6 yards a carry. So very healthy yards per carry, and he, he's not small. He's 6 foot, 215 pounds. Um, PFF compared him. This was their breakdown of him. Said White is a project in everywhere you can think of as a running back. He's also capable of things physically no one else in this class has.
Mm-hmm. And you could,
That's pretty telling. Again, PFF, say what you want about them. They are hard on uh, on players coming into the NFL. And you're talking about that type of statement about an undrafted free agent.
well, and you can see some of the rawness if you watch his tape. I went back and watched another subset of his carries because one thing I noticed is he has a tendency to only carry the ball in his right arm, probably about 90% of the time. So he needs to get a little bit better about swapping the ball to the outside arm at times, especially in traffic. But don't sleep on this kid. Like, there is so much to like about the way he plays. And there are some moves that he makes that, like PFF said, you don't see other members of the draft class make. And that's a fun time.
Yeah, and when you're talking about somebody who has the athletic traits but doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires, that's when you start to get somebody who could really be a steal. So yeah, I mean somebody else too. I mean we'll take a deeper dive into all the undrafted free agents. It's actually one of our biggest shows of the year because we're one of the only ones that do it after the draft here. Um, but two other guys who I thought were definitely going to get drafted somewhere. And one of them is Kellen Deesh, the offensive tackle from Arizona State, built very tall and thin, but also really athletic. And if he adds, and I said this in our offensive tackle segment, if he adds 15 or 20 pounds, this is somebody that can definitely play in the NFL and maybe even be backup insurance there for Teron Armstead.
Quite possibly. I mean, Kellen Deese was a guy we talked about in our I believe in our offensive tackle or our offensive guard segment. I honestly can't remember which at this
Okay,
point.
he's purely a tackle.
And it's another guy we talked about a little bit that I know we'll dive into more is Blaze Andrews as somebody that was very raw, but also showed a tremendous amount of talent and potential. So yeah, Miami's starting to grab those offensive tackles, and Mike McDaniel showed out in San Francisco that he didn't need a lot of first and second round offensive linemen to be able to develop an effective strategy that put the advantage in their hands.
Certainly.
This could be an interesting group. And another guy we thought would get drafted, or two guys that I thought would get drafted that are on that list, are Virginia Tech defensive tackle Jordan Williams and Mississippi wide receiver Braylon Sanders. So
yeah, Braylon Sanders played in the Senior Bowl, so he's somebody that Jim Nagy certainly thought enough of to bring there, and they have a pretty strict list of guys that they invite. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. And finally, too, we'll talk more about the undrafted free agents, but Veron McKinley from Oregon is somebody who's, honestly small and slow, but very, very instinctive. And he was Javon Holland's teammate at Oregon. Played beside him at the safety spot, and had 5 or 6 interceptions this past year. So he's somebody that, look, I've said that when it comes to drafting defensive backs in the first, 3 or 4 rounds of the draft, they have to have the speed to cover the field, cover receivers all over the defense. Veron McKinley may not do that, but we're talking about an undrafted free agent, and he ran a 4.62, which probably isn't good enough, but Nick Needham ran a 4.67. So if they have the awareness to make up for it, maybe the Dolphins get lucky there.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the way we get creative on defense, he may just be a role player, but a role player that can fill kind of a fun role if he's used correctly.
Absolutely. So overall, Paul, including Tyreek Hill into this equation, what do you give the Dolphins draft?
Including Tyreek Hill?
Yes.
I'd give it an A. The draft itself was light, but we got Tyreek Hill, and we got a little more capital for next year as well. But with the Devontae Parker trade, I really like those first 2 picks. I think they got tremendous value for the fact that it was end of the third, middle of the fourth, with 2 players I think should have probably gone a little bit higher. And just looking at a couple of the UDFA guys and the fact that we didn't have a tremendous number of holes to fill, I think Miami, actually, I'll give them an A- right now, but I think that grade could go up.
Yeah, I was at an A- on that. If they had done a few more creative things with the picks that they had, then I would kick it up to an A+. But an A+ is the best of the best of the best. So I'm not there on that, but I mean, to me, getting Tyreek Hill, it can't be understated that this guy just turned 28 years old. Nobody thought he would be available. The Dolphins pounced on it immediately, and the trade was done in the middle of the workday in 2 hours for one of the best receivers in the league that completely changes the way that defense is played. Sam Munson on a PFF said it best. It is not even an option to play certain defenses when you have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill at wide receiver. I mean, so I'm definitely excited about that. And it's been a really good time here over the last couple of days. We're happy that you all could be with us for the 9 to 10 hours that we were together. And I hope you've enjoyed it too, Paul.
I did. And you know what? I got to give a shout out because we've got people in the chat right now that I can't think of more than a few minutes we were online that I didn't see them participating. I want to give Grandizer a huge shout out for putting out stats, player information, etc. in the chat. I think he absolutely killed it helping us out with this one. And just to answer a quick question in chat, Tyler Algier ended up with Atlanta. I think it was somewhere around pick 150 or so. But
Yeah,
no, like Brett,
fifth
you did a
round
great
pick. Yep.
job helping out in chat, and really everybody here, thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you guys like, make sure you subscribe. This was, despite the fact we only had 4 picks, this was a really fun draft.
And imagine now next year when the Dolphins have 5 picks in the first like 90.
Yes.
How
We're gonna
much
have
of a
fun
good
with that
time.
too.
How much of a good time. So if we could stretch our comfort zone this much with 4 picks in the entire draft, and 2 of them were in the 7th round. So yeah, it's been a blast, and that's going to do it for our breakdown of the Dolphins 2022 draft class. I'm Brian Cat, NFL. Paul is fanatic_pick. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, all of our social media outlets, and also the finfanatic.com website and the FanSide network. If it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the FinSide.